All right, so we're back for another deep dive, and today we're going to be looking at NLC India Limited's Q3 performance for fiscal year 25. We've got a pretty interesting mix of stuff to dig into today. We've got, of course, the company's official statements, press releases and all that, but we've also got their financial reports, and just to spice things up a little bit, we've even got a few snippets from their investor call. So it should give us a pretty well-rounded view of how things are going, beyond just the headlines.
Yeah, definitely. I'm particularly interested to see kind of how this energy giant is, balancing their traditional operations with, well, India's big push for renewable energy these days.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, right off the bat, their power generation capacity, it got a pretty big bump, right?
Yeah.
Up to 6,731.06 milliW from 6,071.06 milliW. That's a new 660 milliW unit at that Navali Uttar Pradesh Power Limited plant, if I'm remembering correctly.
You got it. And it's worth noting, this is actually their first one using ultra supercritical technology. It sounds very fancy, but basically they're able to squeeze more power out of the same amount of coal, which is obviously good for efficiency, and it also helps with emissions.
So, squeezing more juice out of the coal. I like that. But okay, what about all this talk about renewables, right? Their press release mentions a bunch of these new joint ventures they're getting into.
Yeah, it looks like they're kind of taking a multi-pronged approach, right?
Yeah.
So we've got like a 3 by 125 milliW lignite-based thermal station. That one's in Rajasthan. Then there's a massive 2,000 milliW renewable power project also in Rajasthan. Oh, and a 1,000 milliW solar project in Assam.
See, that Assam project is the one that really caught my eye. Isn't that a kind of strange place to put a solar plant? I mean, doesn't Assam have like notoriously low levels of sunlight?
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's not exactly, the sunniest spot. And actually, someone in the investor call, they asked about that. And the way NLCIL explained it, they're not just looking at peak sunlight hours, right? They're factoring in this cost plus tariff structure. So basically that means they're guaranteeing a certain return no matter like how much power the sun actually ends up generating.
Hmm.
Plus they pointed out that transmitting power from other regions, ones that get more sun, that gets really expensive really fast.
So it's like a long-term strategic play, not just about, chasing the most sunshine.
Yeah, exactly. And it's pretty smart of them to lock in that capital gains tax exemption, for transferring of those renewable assets to their subsidiary. That's NLC India Renewable Limited,
Right.
or, NIRL for short. So yeah, they're definitely incentivized to keep moving in this direction.
It's like they're preparing for a future where it's not just coal powering everything, right?
Right. And speaking of coal, their mining operations are, well, they're booming, to say the least. They hit a record 115.16 lakh metric tons of production, which is, well, that's a 40.11% jump.
Wow, that is impressive, especially considering that land acquisition problem they mentioned having at their Niveli mines, in the financial reports. That sounds like it could throw a real wrench in their plans.
Potentially, yeah, but they're not just sitting around waiting. They're tackling it head on with something they call contingency mining. Basically, finding ways to work around the problem and keep the lignite flowing really shows their commitment to keeping things moving forward.
Persistence, that's the key in this business, for sure. Okay, so let's get to the really fun part, the numbers. Their financials are, well, they're stellar, to put it mildly. Record revenue from operations, a whopping Rs, 11,445 crore. That's a 21% increase. Their total income hit Rs, 12,909 crore, which is a 30% jump. And get this, their profit after tax, it's through the roof, Rs. 2,245 crore, that's a 28% increase. I mean, are they printing money over there?
Well, it certainly seems that way. But what's really interesting to me is their target for return on equity on those renewable energy projects. They're aiming for 12%, which is, well, that's comparable to, if not exceeding, what they usually get from their traditional operations.
So they're not just going green for the good PR, huh? They're actually making it work for them financially.
Yeah, it seems so. It's a pretty good demonstration that renewable energy can be a smart business move, not just, an ethical one.
Now, it wasn't all sunshine and roses, though, right? Remember that under-recovery issue that popped up? Imagine you're selling lemonade, but, like, the lemons and the sugar cost you more than what people are willing to pay for a glass. That's kind of what's happening with NLCIL. They're not quite making enough profit to cover their costs.
Yeah, that's a problem that crops up a lot in the energy sector, especially when you've got regulated tariffs in the mix. But NLCIL, they're not just letting it slide. They're doing things like modifying those TPS die expansion units to try to improve reliability and availability.
And it sounds like those efforts are starting to pay off, right? They're under recovery. It's down to Rs 517 crore from Rs 725 crore the year before. And they're even saying they can get it down to around Rs 600 crore.
Yeah, it seems like they're really on top of it, which is a good sign. It means they're, actively managing the situation, finding ways to lessen the impact.
So kind of like that ultra supercritical technology, right? Squeezing more profit out of each unit of power.
Exactly. They're definitely committed to efficiency and cost management across all their operations. And it's not just about tweaking the existing stuff either. They've got a whole bunch of exciting new projects in the pipeline, like that new Parchapara South coal mine. They're actually aiming to finish that one ahead of schedule.
Ambitious. And don't forget about that Ghatampur thermal power plant expansion that's supposed to be done by October 25. Plus, they've got the upcoming IPO for NLC India Green Energy Limited. They're not wasting any time, that's for sure.
It's a whirlwind of activity over there. Makes you wonder, can they keep up this pace without spreading themselves too thin? That's definitely something we'll have to explore further as we continue our deep dive.
We'll be back in just a moment to uncover even more insights about NLC India Limited. Stay with us.
And we're back, digging deeper into NLC India Ltd.
Yeah, we've been taking a close look at their Q3 performance in fiscal year 25, and I gotta say, they're really not holding back when it comes to growth.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, we were just talking about those record-breaking coal production numbers, right?
Yeah.
And how they're using, what was it, contingency mining to work around that land acquisition issue at Neyveli. But okay, all that coal, it's got to go somewhere, right? And it seems like they've got that covered too with their Paprapara South coal mine project. That one's actually on track to be finished ahead of schedule, so plenty of fuel for all those power plants they're expanding. Right, and then there's the Ghatampur thermal power plant expansion. That one's supposed to be wrapped up by, what was it, October 2025, if I remember correctly. It's really impressive, They're managing these huge projects, like, at the same time, they're making this big push into renewables.
Speaking of renewables, that 1,000 milliW solar project in Assam, I keep coming back to that. It
Oh,
just
yeah.
seems so counterintuitive. I mean, Assam, it's not exactly known for, being super sunny, is it?
It's definitely not the first place you'd think of, right? But you got to remember what NLCIL said during the investor call, right? It's not all about chasing the most sunshine. They're taking into account that cost plus tariff, which guarantees a certain return no matter what. And then you've got the high cost of transmitting power from other regions.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a gamble for sure, but, well, it's a calculated one.
Yeah, they could end up hitting the jackpot if they play their cards, right?
Exactly. It's not just a knee-jerk reaction to, like, the whole renewables trend. They're thinking long-term, looking at all the angles, environmental, economic, the whole picture.
Seems like that's their MO, They're not just jumping on the bandwagon. They're plotting their course carefully. And speaking of carefully calculated moves, let's talk about those financials again. Those record-breaking numbers are pretty eye-popping, but are they sustainable?
That's the million-dollar question, right? But one thing that gives me some confidence is that, well, it's not all about coal anymore, right? Their renewable energy segment, that's playing a bigger and bigger role in their profits.
Yeah, and they even mention aiming for a 12% return on equity for those renewable projects, which is right up there with even maybe a little better than what they get from their traditional stuff.
It's a pretty bold statement, isn't it? They're showing everyone that going green doesn't have to mean sacrificing profits. It's a win-win for them and for India's push towards clean energy.
Sustainability and profitability, walking hand in hand.
Exactly. And it's not just about the numbers, right? NLCIL, they've been getting some recognition for their, corporate social responsibility initiatives.
Yeah.
They got an award for, like, upholding high standards in mining. And they were also recognized as a top performer in that Special Campaign 4.0 thing.
Yeah.
That's all about improving governance and operational efficiency.
So it's not just about making money. They're trying to do it the right way.
Yeah, it's a holistic approach, thinking about the environment, the social impact, all of it. It's a sign that they're in it for the long haul. They're invested in sustainable growth.
And this all makes their upcoming IPO for NLC India Green Energy Limited, that makes it even more interesting, don't you think? It's like they're inviting investors to come along for the ride, be part of this green future they're building.
It's a smart move, no doubt about it. By launching Nigel as a separate entity, they can attract investors who are specifically looking to put money into renewables.
And it gives them a way to raise capital that's like earmarked for growing that side of the business, right?
Right. It's a strategic way to, really unlock that potential in the renewable energy space.
So, okay, let's recap. They're raising capital, they're expanding, they're posting record profits. It almost sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? But gotta ask, what are the potential downsides to this whole aggressive growth strategy?
That's a great point. I mean, sometimes when you expand too quickly, you can end up spreading yourself too thin,
Yeah.
or overlooking risks. NLCIL, they need to make sure they've got strong risk management in place if they want to keep scaling up like this.
And they can't afford to let operational excellence slip either, right?
Right. Yeah.
Juggling all these projects, integrating new technologies, adapting to changes in the market, that's got to be tough.
Oh, absolutely. It's a delicate balancing act for sure. They've got to keep the current operations running smoothly while they're building for the future. And we've talked about how they're handling that under recovery problem and the land acquisition issue, but those are just a couple of examples.
Right. It'll be interesting to see how they handle all the challenges that come their way as they grow.
Which brings us to a pretty crucial question for our listeners.
Welcome back to the deep dive one last time.
Yeah, we've been really digging into NLC India Limited's performance this quarter. All their successes and the bumps in the road.
Definitely on the up and up, but like we've been talking about, growth that fast, it's always going to come with some growing pains, right? Kind of like building a skyscraper. Got to have a strong foundation to support all those extra floors.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And for NLCIL, I'd say that foundation is their ability to, manage risk well. They're really branching out in a big way, both geographically and in terms of technology, right?
Mm.
That Assam Solar project is a perfect example. They've clearly done their research, but there's always going to be those unexpected curveballs.
Right, and it's not just stuff happening outside the company that they got to worry about. As they get bigger, keeping that strong company culture, making sure they can attract and keep good people, that's going to be huge. End of the day, a company's only as good as the folks working there.
Oh, for sure. And then you got the whole regulatory landscape to consider, right?
Yeah.
India's energy sector, it's changing all the time. New policies, incentives, the whole 9 yards. NLCL is going to have to stay on their toes if they want to
Well,
keep up.
sailing in uncharted waters could be smooth sailing, could be a storm. You never know.
Exactly. And that brings us to, well, a pretty important question for you, our listener. Can NLCIL pull it off?
Hmm.
Can they strike that balance between, ambition and being smart about it? Can they keep up this growth while handling all the risks and the complications that come with being in the energy business these days?
That's the question, isn't it? And I guess we'll just have to wait and see how things unfold for NLCIL. But they've definitely shown they think strategically and that they're committed to growing in a sustainable way.
Yeah, they're not throwing away their old business, but they're embracing all these new possibilities with renewable energy, too. It's really interesting to see how they're right there at the forefront of India's whole energy transformation.
And hey, hopefully this deep dive, it's given you some of the insights, the tools you need to keep up with NLCIL's journey, to really understand what's going on.
Yeah, remember, you got to dig a little deeper. Don't take things at face value. Connect the dots.
Keep asking those questions, keep learning, keep diving deep.
And until next time, keep those brains working.
See you on the next deep dive.